I would like to acknowledge all of our benefactors for 2025. They are the Crawford Howard Family Foundation, TC Energy, Bank of America, AutoZone, FedEx, the Hyde Family Foundation, Buckman, International Paper, the Assisi Foundation, Jim Karras Subaru, Terminex, Ring Container Technologies, Brother International Corporation, First Horizon Foundation, and Silvamo. Thank you for their ongoing support. Of course, all of our supporters, corporations, individual donors, and volunteers are critically important in allowing us to deliver on our mission, the protection and enhancement of the Wolf River watershed as a sustainable natural resource. As always, gifts of any size are appreciated. Please see our website at www.wolfriver.org/give. And finally, a few housekeeping details. We ask that you do not attempt to record this program with any device. If you have questions during the program, please use the Q&A feature and not the chat box. Our education director, Kathy, will be monitoring the questions and will ask them after the program. Now, it is my pleasure to present to you our speaker for this evening. Cyndi Routledge is a federal and state licensed master bird bander and founder of Southeastern Avian Research, which is located in Clarksville, Tennessee. In addition to her nonprofit research work with hummingbirds, songbirds, and small owls, Cyndi conducts contract aviation conservation work for the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. Cyndi's first love and major research subject are hummingbirds, including winter hummingbirds. She's banded nearly 18,000 hummingbirds since she began her research in 2014. Ladies and gentlemen, Cyndi Routledge.
There we go. Good evening, everyone. I hope that you can see the screen. We're going to get started. I've got a lot of information tonight, and we're going to try to get through it as quick as possible, but so that you can remember it. So, from the 2HB hummingbird of Cuba to the starling-sized giant hummingbird of Colombia, Chile, Ecuador, and Argentina, hummingbirds are unique and they're stunningly beautiful. They inspire us. They link us with each other, and they unite us with nature. They connect us culturally, spiritually, and geographically. And it is that connection that is essential for any migratory species like hummingbirds and important for a variety of ecological reasons. Hummingbirds are a very diverse family of birds. Their inability to walk and their iridescent colors are just two of their amazing attributes. They're exclusively a bird of the Americas, found only in North, South, and Central America. The largest concentration of these hummingbirds can be found in South and Central America. Ecuador has 135 species with 4 endemics, and Colombia has 169 with 18 endemics. Currently, the number of hummingbirds in the Americas is around 360 different species. But here in North America, we have 16 known breeding species, and these are a picture of each one of them. But east of the Mississippi, where we are here in Tennessee, we only have one, and it is the ruby-throated hummingbird. This is the male at the top and the female at the bottom. The male is characterized by that red throat, that long forked tail, and that emerald green back. He weighs about 3 grams, which is, if you put a couple of paper clips in your hand, feels about like that. He's 3.5 inches from the tip of that bill to the end of that tail. Females and younger birds are larger, slightly larger than males. Their hearts beat 250 times a minute at rest and up to 1,200 times a minute when hovering in front of a flower. In relation to their body size, their brains are one of the biggest in the avian world, with a total weight of about 4.2% of that body mass. Flight is essential to a hummingbird, and this is an actual X-ray of a hummingbird, and it shows you the large keel where all the flight muscles are attached. And those flight muscles make up about 25% of the mass of a hummingbird. And unlike other birds, hummingbirds gain lift on both the up and the downstroke because they beat their wings in sort of a figure-8 motion, keeping them stiff and rotating them from the shoulder. And they do it 60 to 80 times a second. And that enables them to fly backwards, forwards, hover in the air, even fly upside down if the need arises. And they can do it up at speeds of up to 40 miles an hour. Hummingbirds are characterized by that iridescent plumage, most especially the males. The brilliant colors of the plumage are not caused by pigment, but rather by layers of microscopic air bubbles that refract, reflect, and recombine the sunlight to produce the color that we see. And the male will use this to signal other hummers for defensive territory, for mating purposes, and a simple toss of the head, as depicted here with the same bird on the same feeder, just the picture taken from 2 different angles, can switch that color on and off. As a hummingbird, it's important to keep your 945 feathers in good order. So hummingbirds spend a good bit of their time preening, cleaning, and oiling their feathers. Old feathers are systematically and symmetrically replaced each year in a process known as molt. The white specks that you see on these birds are what we call pin feathers, which is quite simply a new feather at the beginning stage of growth. And since a feather cannot break through the skin, looking like a feather when we think of a feather, these pin feathers are covered in a sheath made of keratin, and it pokes through the skin, and then the feather blooms and is beautiful and all ready for the next season. Most people think that a hummingbird bill is hard and rigid, but the bill is actually soft and quite easily damaged. It's flexible, it has a rich blood supply, and it's very sensitive to the touch of flowers, much like your fingertips. The other job of the bill is to protect the tongue. Hummingbirds have a very highly specialized tongue, and it was long thought that they used that tongue like a straw, but these high images with a microscope shows that it's very different and acts like a micro pump. So when a hummingbird approaches a flower, it squeezes its tongue, these ridges in its tongue flat, and when it hits the nectar, it springs back and draws it in. I like to say, if you think of a sponge, that's kind of the way their tongue works. So the hummingbird tongue is also very long, much longer than you might think, and it will wrap around and the jaw when it draws it in, as depicted in this picture here. This shows the anatomy of the tongue. So I get a lot of questions about how hummingbirds sleep. Typically, they'll find a rigid perch, they'll point that bill upwards, just close their eyes and go to sleep. But when it's really cold in early spring or late fall, hummingbirds have yet another special adaptation called torpor. And it's a means of surviving cold night temperatures for short periods of time without food. What happens is their body automatically lowers their body temperature and automatically lowers that heart rate. So they're not using any energy, and they're relying on their body fat to keep them warm. In the morning, when the sun hits them, they shiver and they warm up and fly off and have breakfast. So when it comes to reproduction, the female rubythroat is truly the workhorse of the pair. It takes her 60 days from the time that she arrives and finds a location to when she fledges young from the nest. And in this part of the world, in Tennessee, she can do it most likely twice, but up to 3 times. Currently, the ruby-throated hummingbird is the only species known to breed east of the Mississippi, but it does have the largest breeding territory of any hummingbird, and which is good news because the large territory enables them to be what we call generalists and take advantage of a lot of different habitats, a lot of different flowers. This is a hummingbird nest. It's about the size of a quarter. It is made of spider webs, lichen and mosses, and filled with soft fibrous material. It's unique in that because it's made of spider webbing, it grows as the young birds grow. So this is a typical placement of a ruby-throated hummingbird nest. It's usually found on a downward sloping branch at the bottom of the canopy, sometimes over water, usually anywhere from 3 to 60 feet high. And as I said, all the work of building the nest and raising the young is done by the females. But hummingbirds don't read the book and they don't listen to me. They put them where they think they have the best chance of raising young. And this one is on a chain of a porch swing. This one is one of my favorite pictures. It's on a wind chime, and you can see how the spider webbing is used to attach it so it adheres to it. This one, it was taken in Paris, Tennessee a couple years ago, and it is on a little battery operated light that sat right outside the host's window. So a ruby throat lays 2 eggs 2 days apart. The eggs are about the size of a tic tac. And unlike other songbirds, once she lays that first egg, she begins incubating right away. And here she is sitting on her nest, where she will sit about 80% of the day, only leaving briefly to feed and return. She'll incubate those eggs anywhere from 12 to 16 days. And to allow her to sit on that nest for long periods of time without feeding, she again reduces her body temperature, burning less calories. And this is also one of the reasons that during breeding season in late May, June, and early July, that you see less of your hummingbird at your feeder. They don't have time to linger at your feeders. They're busy incubating eggs and raising that next generation. So when babies hatch, they're what we call artificial. They're blind, they're naked, and they're helpless. And they're about the size of a bumblebee. If you can see that slide, there are 2 little hummingbirds in there. Those eggs hatch 2 days apart because one is laid first and 2 days later, the other one is laid. So this is those same birds a few days later and even later on. Babies grow quickly, doubling in weight and size about every 2 days. You can also see that they're beginning to get their feathers. Those little pin feathers are sticking through. And it's the hum of the mother's wing that alerts them to pop up their head, open their mouths, in which she deposits a high protein and carbohydrate slurry made of insects and nectar. And she will feed those baby birds from sunup to sundown about every 10 minutes or so. These birds are approaching 21 days, which is about the time when they leave the nest. And when they leave the nest, they are as big or bigger than their mom due to her excellent care. They will fledge 2 days apart, usually making a short flight to an adjacent tree where they'll stay for about 3 to 5 days, begging for food and practicing flying between branches, building up those flight muscles before they leave for good. And when they leave for good, all motherly love is over. She does not lead them. She does not teach them. Everything that baby hummingbirds learn is inherited knowledge. But life as a new hummingbird is very hard, as it is for most baby birds. And sadly, only 1 in 5 newly fledged birds will see their first birthday. But if they do make it to that first birthday, They typically live anywhere between 3 and 6 years. So while we're talking about nesting, don't be scammed by these things that you find on the internet. Hummingbirds are not cavity nesters. They won't use any of these houses, no matter what people say or what pictures they draw. They're not going to go inside. They build their own nest on a tree branch, as we talked about. So help spread the word so folks don't buy these and think that they're going to get hummingbirds in them. Some of the larger ones, you'll get chickadees or Carolina wrens, but you'll never get a hummingbird inside a hummingbird house. So every once in a while, I get a phone call. Someone says, I've got this teeny tiny little hummingbird in my garden. And most times I know that when they say it's teeny tiny, that it is a hummingbird moth. And this is a picture of a hummingbird moth. They move among your flowers just like a hummingbird. And unless you look really close, you can mistake it for a hummingbird. So let's switch up a little and talk about predators. Adult ruby throats don't have many natural predators. They have snakes, small owls, small hawks, praying mantis, large spiders. And I always tell people, don't kill the snakes, don't kill the large spiders. Just relocate them away from your feeders and everything will be all right. But by far the biggest predator of hummingbirds is Fluffy. And I like indoor cats. I'm not fond of outdoor cats. So let's keep our cats inside. And if you happen to have an outside cat for whatever reason, be mindful where you hang your hummingbird feeders, or perhaps don't hang them at all so that you're not laying out a buffet. So now let's talk about what I think is one of the most amazing attributes of this little 3-gram bird, and that is its migration journey. But first, let's dispel a few myths. They do not ride on the back of a goose or on airplane wings, nor do they take a boat. They rely on their own wing power and stored fuel. This is a map from eBird. The red shows where the all breeding ruby throats, and they've got to get down into that blue, down into the Yucatan Peninsula. And this happens twice a year, going from the wintering grounds to the breeding grounds and vice versa. In the spring, it's a finite amount of time to return to where you were born and to reproduce. And the shortest journey is across that Gulf of Mexico. So a ruby-throated hummingbird will make a minimum of 845-mile nonstop journey across the Gulf of Mexico. It'll take them anywhere between 20 and 26 hours to make the journey over that open water. And once they start, they can't stop. And then once they hit the coast, those birds who were born up north or as far as southern Canada have another 1,000 miles to travel. So in the spring, they are in a hurry to get there. And as they go, they stop at each and every patch of flower and feeder that they remember, or that knowledge was inherited from their parents. Here's another myth that I'm going to dispel tonight. Males do arrive first. That is true, but they are not scouts. There are no such thing as scouts in the world of hummingbirds. They don't exist. By definition, a scout is someone who comes ahead and then goes back and tells everybody what they found and brings them there. A hummingbird will never share its source of food with anyone. They are loners. They are mean. They are hateful creatures. I know people don't like to hear that, but they need to be that way in order to survive. So each spring, there is a concern about the lack of numbers of ruby throat in your backyard. We've heard it a lot these last 2 years. And this is a visual map of the trend of ruby-throated hummingbirds, again from eBird from 2012 to 2022. It really shows that they were doing very well through 2022. Overall, the population is up about 18%. And there are many explanations that we hypothesize, that we've proven, that are possible explanations for a drop in birds. One of the biggest is a wider distribution of existing numbers due to hundreds and hundreds of more people feeding hummingbirds since COVID. Everybody was stuck at home. They wanted to do something. So, let's feed the hummingbirds. And so they started hanging feeders. And to understand this distribution, you need to understand that hummingbirds feed on a loop. They're trap line feeders. They have to go from flower to flower to flower to flower, and it's about a half-mile range. And so if you were the only person in that half mile who was feeding, and now 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of your neighbors are feeding, those birds make it around to your feeders less during that loop. Another thing we're seeing is insects and this spring particularly, there is an abundance of, because of all the rain we've had, of natural nectar and insects. And hummingbirds will always choose that over our feeders. Our feeders are fast food. We also already mentioned that the females are busy nesting, and so we don't see them. And then, of course, there is also, we're finding a problem with overuse of pesticides and herbicides, most especially mosquito fogging. 80% of a hummingbird's diet are soft-bodied insects, including mosquitoes, gnats, no-see-ums. And if you fog spray, you're killing a food source. So that bird isn't going to just hang around. It's going to leave and go find food elsewhere. So those are just a few of the reasons why you might be seeing less at your home. So if you need to eat about every 10 to 15 minutes, how are you going to make that migratory journey, whether it's coming here in the spring or going back to the Yucatan Peninsula in fall? Well, you need to get fat. They need to double their size, and recent studies also show that by feeding, as they in a feeding frenzy and feeding, they will increase their flight muscles up to 40% in order to make those migratory journeys. So you need both that fuel and those increased muscle to make it that entire way. But they don't have to. In the spring, that's what they're doing. They're doubling their weight so they can jump the Gulf. In the fall, it's a little bit different. You don't have to make one big journey. You're not in a big hurry as you are in the spring. And so they can put on small amounts of fat to fly short distances. And that fat is the fuel that enables them to make those journeys. So let's talk a little bit about food and feeders. I want you to notice that the nectar is not red, that it's clear, that it's not cloudy. Please, if you remember nothing at all from tonight, please remember no red nectar. Even though red dye number 40 is still legal in the US, the FDA has set limits for human consumption and recommends that people not ingest large quantities of a single dye product, even if it's made from caramine, which are beetle shells. However, when we set up a hummingbird feeder with and put red dye in it, that's just what we're encouraging hummingbirds to do. And that's the core of the problem. A hummingbird taking in artificially dyed nectar may be ingesting the dye in concentrations that are over 17 times the accepted daily intake for a 180-pound man. So we don't know what they're doing, what it's necessarily doing to them. We've never done a dedicated study because we would have to take a bunch of birds, keep them in captivity. They don't do well in captivity anyway, subject them to all that, and then when they pass away, do necropsies on them to see what it's done to them. We just know that it's not necessary. And so we err on the side of caution. And when something isn't necessary or you question it, don't do it. Because when we feed these birds, we pledge to do no harm. So always err on the side of caution. This red dye also has a lot of additives and preservatives in it. And my question to you would be, would you drink it? And if you won't drink it, then please don't feed it to your hummingbirds. This is a hummingbird in my hand, and I can tell that someone was feeding it red dye because they don't process it, and when they eliminate red. This is also what happens when somebody's feeding red dye. The honeybees or bees get into it, and bees cannot digest or use that, and it can contaminate and cause collapse of an entire hive of bees. So please just forget about the red stuff. If you think you need red to attract them, what color's your feeder? Red. And if you don't have a red feeder, I recommend going to buy one. So what is the proper ratio? I was always taught 4 parts water, 1 part sugar. No honey, no raw sugar, no artificial sweetener. So why 4 to 1? Hummingbird pollinating flowers produce nectar in a wide range of concentrations, and hummingbirds visit plants with a variety of nectar concentrations. Therefore, there is no natural 100% correct or perfect ratio. But 4 to 1 is kind of a one size fits most, gives them the water they need, balances the carbohydrates, and makes them still want to pollinate your flowers because they are pollinators and that is their job, to pollinate your flowers. And remember, our feeders are really only supplemental food anyway. We're not trying to provide their sole source of carbohydrates. The only exception to that rule is if a hurricane comes and wipes out complete habitats, then these feeders become a lifeline. But for generally speaking, they are just supplemental food. So let's talk about feeders. I get a lot of questions about feeders. And what is the best feeder? And my recommendation always 100% of the time will be the feeder that you can keep the cleanest, because keeping that feeder clean is what is most important. You should use hot water to scrub all parts, top and bottom, every little nook and cranny. You can buy little brushes to get into ports to clean them. And there should be none of that black residue or that black mold. We know that black mold is a fungus. It will coat the tongue and the throat of a hummingbird, and it will eventually choke them and cause death. So we want to keep those feeders so clean that we would drink from them. People always, they'll back me into a corner and they'll say, well, what do you use at your house? And I'll tell you, first, I get no money from this company, but I love their feeders. And their feeders are called aspect feeders. They are a saucer type feeder. They are super easy to clean. They're easy to fill. You can view the quality of the nectar. They come in sizes from 4 ounces to 18 ounces. They have a built-in ant moat, a lifetime guarantee, and if it's important to you, they are made in the US. The other good thing about a saucer feeder is if you have a bee issue where they are swarming your feeders, if you only fill this halfway, hummingbird tongues can get to the nectar. Remember from that picture how long they are. Bee tongues cannot, and the bees will eventually leave. So if you can buy these feeders from a variety of different sources. If you want to email me at southeasternavianresearch.org, I can give you locations where you can buy them. This is an ant moat. It hangs between the feeder and the hook. You fill it with clean, clear water. It acts as a barrier for ants who come up the shepherd's hook, hit the water, and can't cross it. And so use it but only put water in it. And as you can see, it also becomes a personal drinking fountain for other small birds. There's an American goldfinch taking advantage of that water. I get a lot of questions about fountains, and really in the East, our hummingbirds get most of the liquid that they need from nectar, but they do love a mister because it acts like a gentle rain shower. And if you've ever seen them in a gentle rain shower, they love to just sit out and preen and take a bath. So a mister works. You can, if you want to, you can also put out a fountain. But those pictures that you see on the internet with many birds bathing in a feeder are usually from out west, where it is so terribly dry, where the drought is, or the deserts of Arizona. You're not likely to see that happen here in the East. So these are some of my favorite flowers that are hummingbird favorites. This is red buckeye. It's a native. The top picture is red buckeye, and it blooms just about the time when hummingbirds are arriving. The bottom picture is coral native honeysuckle, and I love that I have that on quite a few arbors in my yard. It continually blooms through the whole season. They also like red cardinal flower and bee balm or monardia. It blooms in the summer. And then salvia in all colors and shapes. And they'll bloom till the frost. So there'll always be blooms around. And speaking of, when should you take those feeders down? I get that question quite often. And Eric mentioned that I do winter hummingbird research, and people say, winter hummingbird research? That's weird. I didn't think there were any hummingbirds here in the winter. Well, I'm here to tell you that there are. This is actually a bird that, Rufous hummingbird, that returned for 3 winters to a small patio in Nashville, Tennessee, 1 block from the zoo. My friend Bill Taylor called me in 2020 to tell me he had this bird. He forgot to take his feeder in, and lo and behold, this bird found it, and then she came back earlier and earlier each season. So it is possible to have one of these Western birds come and spend the winter in Tennessee. Let's see if we can get on. So these are actual pictures from 2 Western birds from January of 2024 that were taken in Memphis, right there where you all are, at a home in a subdivision. She had a feeder hanging out, and lo and behold, she got a black-chinned hummingbird and a young Rufous hummingbird all in the same. And due to the increasing number of hummingbirds that are spending the winter, they are now making commercial heated feeders. Go figure, right? So, but there's no need to purchase these or hang these unless you have a bird. And if you do have a bird, I hope that I'll hear from you. If you choose to leave a feeder out year round. But if you want to take your feeder in and just feed seasonal birds, I just ask that you leave it up for 2 weeks after you see your last bird. So it's going to be different for everyone. There is no one date on the calendar. If you see your last hummingbird on Halloween, I ask that you just leave it up until middle November. And that way you can provide food for perhaps a late traveler or a young bird who is just making its way south. These are some homemade, creative ways to keep nectar warm. We won't dwell on it, but people got very creative before they started making commercial feeders. So this is one of the most frequent winter birds that we have in Tennessee, and this is a Rufous hummingbird who commutes annually between Mexico and Alaska, making the longest flight relative to body size of any bird in the world. Last winter in Tennessee, I banded 13 of these birds. They were here. Some of them spent a few weeks. Some of them spent the entire winter with their host. This is the second most frequent winter visitor. This is a black-chinned hummingbird that breeds in the western US and into British Columbia. And then these are pictures of all the other winter hummingbirds through the years since November of 1990 that we have documented in Tennessee. And Allen's hummingbird, broad-tailed hummingbird, calliope hummingbird, broad-billed hummingbird, and Anna's hummingbird. And then every once in a while, a really rare bird shows up. And in 2020, I had the pleasure of banding this Mexican violet ear right here in Clarksville. It was only the third time it was seen in the state of Tennessee, and the first time one was banded. It was indeed a thrill for both the host and for myself. So this is a map of, and each dot represents a winter bird. That is my territory, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Mississippi. And these are banded birds since 1990. So how do we band these birds? Well, if you've never seen it, we'll go through this really quick. We have a cage that much looks like a bird cage. We hang a feeder inside because, of course, it's all about the food. And so they fly in freely. We have a little remote control, drops the door, and then we have the bird safely in the trap. We'll then go put it in a nice cloth, soft bag. It'll be brought to the banding table. First one in is first one served. We then place it in the toe of a pantyhose so that those delicate wings are held down by its side, and I can hold on to the pantyhose and not the bird. We will look at the wing because the wing is going to tell us male or female in a lot of instances with these winter birds. In some instances, it can also give us some clues as to what species it is, because a lot of them are not adult males. And if they don't have that gorget, sometimes you have to use a variety of different distinguishing factors to figure out what bird you actually have. When we sex ruby throats, we're going to look at the primary sixth feather. And the one on the right is a female, and the one on the left is a male. That is going to tell us 100% of the time, regardless of what the throat looks like, what sex bird we have in our hand. And it's especially useful when we have young birds in our hand. These are the bands that we use. They are extremely lightweight bands. They are issued to us by the Federal Department of the Interior, the USGS Bird Banding Laboratory. It comes on a sheet. I have to cut them for each species of hummingbird, where it's a different size. I call it arts and crafts for hummingbirds. But in the end, each band will have a letter and 5 numbers on it. And it's very unique. No other bird will have that number. So then we have taken a random bird flying around the garden and turned it into an individual. And by making it an individual, then we can truly study and see what they're doing. These are how I house my bands. There's about 100 that fit on there. The diaper pin just indicates female because, as I said earlier, females are larger than males. So this just tells me these are female bands quick to my eye. There is the band, tiny little band formed, goes in pliers. Here we are placing it on the leg of the bird. Then of course, there it is on the leg of the bird. And then we're going to take measurements because measurements are important. Again, it will help us age, sex, and even identify the species. We measure the tail, and then we're going to look at the bill. The bill tells us how we're going to age it. Hummingbirds are just the opposite of us. Young birds have wrinkles or ridges in their bill. In birds, some bone structures are not important to fly, and having your bill fully developed is not important to fly. So they're not completely ossified. They're not filled in, much like the soft spot on a baby's head. So they have these wrinkles. So when we look at them, we can look for this grooving, and then we know we have a young bird in our hand. If there's no grooving there, then it's an adult bird, because by the time they're a year old, those grooves are all filled in. So this just is a picture of a grooved and a non-grooved bill, and what I'm looking for under that magnification. So then we're going to blow on the belly of the bird, and in the spring, as is on the left, we're going to be looking for an egg, and that white under the skin there, that white looking structure, that's actually an egg that is being developed. The picture on the right that looks like a fluid-filled blister, that is actually fat. That is what hummingbird fat looks like, and that is the fuel that enables them to migrate. So, of course, this is scientific research, and there are projects. We have permits both from the federal government and from the state. We take lots and lots of notes. Everything is turned into the bird banding lab, and it's housed there. Of course, I always have a copy of it in order to conduct my research and write my papers. We then will give the bird a quick drink. If you're the host, we'll let you let that bird go. And then onward we go. So finally, I'm going to end tonight with some new technology. What you're looking at here are Blue Morpho digital coded radio tags. And they were developed first to be glued to the back of monarch butterflies, and now we are using them on hummingbirds. They weigh 0.06 grams, and they are super lightweight. That's a little solar panel on them. For the first time ever, I glued these radio tags to 15 ruby-throated hummingbirds in Tennessee, and that study is currently ongoing, and with hopefully with additional funding, we'll be able to continue it again next year. Currently, we're only doing in-season studies because we glue them on the back of the bird, and of course, it only lasts until they start to molt. So we want to, and so they're not yet quite designed for long distance for birds. So here I am putting that tag, that radio tag, on one of those ruby-throated hummingbirds. There it is on the bird. And here we are getting ready to release it. And I thank you all for listening to me tonight. Now I think Kathy's going to come back. If we have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. But thank you for listening.
Thank you, Cyndi. That was just really as excellent as ever. Just really wonderful. Let me give people a few minutes to pop up some questions. Here's our first one. Will hummingbirds return year after year to the same place, as in my backyard?
Yes, they will. And banding has proven that. As a matter of fact, last week when we were at a location, we caught 3 6-year-old birds, females that we had put bands on as youngsters that have returned. Remember, it's not always a set point. Sometimes it's within half a mile. But our current research, and I always say current because we're always learning new things about these birds, says they return to within a half a mile of where they were born.
That is so neat. I have a question. I'm wondering if you would mind returning to the slide with the wing feathers, comparing the male to the female. I want to make sure I saw the difference that you're seeing. I guess it's the shape of the feather you're looking at.
Yes, it is the shape where the little red arrow is pointing.
Okay.
The male feather has no feathering above. That's the one on the left, only below. You see the races or the vein that runs down the center? There is no center, but on the right, you can see the female feather. It has feathering on both sides of that vein.
I see.
And it is the primary sixth feather that you were looking at.
Primary sixth.
Yep.
Okay.
And you count from the top down. So it's simply, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. That's the
Okay.
feather we're looking at.
Got it. Let's see, what data is being collected with the new solar powered devices?
We are looking at movement within the habitat. First of all, we only put them on birds that we knew were on territory. The birds had to meet a whole lot of criterion to get a little tag. One of them was that we knew that they were on territory, that we weren't going to glue that on and they were going to take off for parts unknown. So a lot, more than half of them were birds who had already had a band on them and had returned to that location. So, but what we're looking at is movement between locations, because we have banding data showing birds being banded at one location and then catching them the following year at another location. So we want to know if that is incidental movement or if that is deliberate movement, meaning that they are foraging that far. We can also look at movement through the habitat that they're in. And it also helps us pinpoint for females, possibly where they're nesting. So we can observe them on their nests.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things we're looking at.
And is there any movement on developing something that would could reveal more about their migration?
Yes,
that's a lot
and
for
that
them to
is,
carry.
yes. Mm-hmm. It's the same sort of tag. We just have to create some kind of harness that will work with that highly specialized movement. You know, when you put a harness on a Modus tag or a harness on a bigger bird, let's say we put it on a purple martin, it goes over that shoulder on up the thigh, and it's like a little backpack that fits in the middle of their back. Well, with this movement coming totally from the shoulder, we have to make sure that it does not interfere with that movement. So there are some researchers in Mexico looking at with bigger tropical hummingbirds, because anything that's bigger, it's a little bit easier to work with at first. And so they're capturing them, developing some different ideas, releasing them in a flight cage so that they can watch them and observe them, and tweaking it from there. And we're just not quite there yet, but it is being worked on.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Carl is wondering if your organization accepts donations.
We do. We are a total volunteer organization. I don't get a salary, nothing. It's all volunteer. Everything goes back into our research and to fund our projects. Each of those little tags costs $175.
Wow.
So it's, and you know, they're not getting any cheaper either. They're getting more expensive. So everything goes right back into research. Yes. And we are a 501c3, so all donations are also tax deductible.
That's great. Well, if we don't get another question, I have one. If you have any comments about do pesticides harm hummers directly, do you think? Do they? I'm wondering if they're eating insects coated with pesticides. And then I was also wondering about native versus non-native flowers. Do you have any comments on those?
You know, like with most birds, they tend to metabolize those pesticides fairly well. I mean, I don't want to encourage that by any means, but we don't see too much of a buildup in them. Where the problem happens is if you spray and then they eat a newly or wet bug, then that tends to harm them more than if it's, you know, because they're not going to eat dead insects. So if the insect is dead, they're not going to eat it. It's if they're foraging and happen to eat an insect who hasn't died yet. But what it does is it just wipes out their food supply, and then they just don't hang out. Right. You know, they're going to go looking for it because no bird is going to stay around and starve if they can move on.
And they can't make it on nectar alone.
No, right? No. Nobody can live by sugar water alone. You know, they need that protein. The protein is what, you know, develops feathers and muscle and, they need, yes, 80% is insects. So if you don't have insects, like other insectivores, they're in trouble. So.
Right. And then I was wondering if you had any comments about native versus non-native nectar flowers.
Well, they're gonna, when I have tropicals, I plant some tropicals. I try to plant natives as many as I can. I just say plant natives because if you get them established, then you don't have to worry about them. Where tropicals will never winter over here, so you're replacing them over and over. Any tubular flower with, good nectar, a hummingbird is going to feed on. So I can't say that I'm a purist and only plant natives. I do both. I probably do 3/4 natives, 1/4 non-native, and mostly when I say non-native, it's plants that will survive, like bottlebrush and things that will survive along the Gulf Coast, but won't in Middle Tennessee.
Cyndi, has there been any study around mortality of hummingbirds coming across the Gulf, like percentage that make it versus don't?
Only generally speaking, not specific. That we're hoping that if we're able to finally create a harness and put these radio tags on birds that are coming across the Gulf, we might be able to get some hard, fast statistics on that. But I've not seen anything, myself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this has been just so cool, and I know my kid. We have hummingbirds in our backyard, and it's my kid's favorite feature of our yard is watching through the window as the hummingbirds come through. So,
thank you for bring them out to one of the. I do 7 different festivals or banding demonstrations through a summer. Unfortunately, many of them are here in my part of the world, but it's to bring a child out to witness it and maybe put a bird in their hand. It's a once in a lifetime thing, and they'll never forget it.
Absolutely.
So,
and
all the places I'll be are on my website under events, and folks can come out and I always tell them, if you remind me that you were at one of my talks, I'll try to put a bird in your hand. So
that's great. Thank you. I know our team was talking about this webinar earlier this week, and we had some folks on our team who got so excited that could even be a possibility that they would want to come out and even have a hummingbird put in their hand, which is an awesome experience. So
yeah.
Well, Cyndi, thank you so much for your time this evening. Do you have the question earlier about where folks can go to donate? And I want to make sure that if folks are interested, they're directed to the right spot. So if you've got a website, we'd love to share that.
There it is, right there, southeasternavianresearch.org.
Fantastic. Well, Cyndi, thank you again for your time. This has been an awesome presentation, one that we've been looking forward to for quite a while. But we always appreciate all of our guests coming on here and sharing with our audience. And we hope that that our folks that are interested in the Wolf River Conservancy go and support you as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And again, everyone, thank you so much for joining this evening's webinar. If you're interested more in the work of the Wolf River Conservancy, again, visit our website, www.wolfriver.org. We have a calendar function there. We have a lot of events coming up later this month and through August. Our Discover the Greenway Fall series. We've got a lot going on. We'd love to have you involved. But with that, once again, Cyndi, thank you. Please visit southeasternavianresearch.org. And everyone have a great night.
Thank you.